You may have never have heard of it, but the Philips CDI console holds an important place in video game history. Not only was it ahead of its time, it also featured officially licensed Nintendo games, but it also represents a sour deal between Nintendo and Sony that eventually brought us the PlayStation as we know it today.
Say you're watching TV and this guy says,
"It's CDI, friends, the next generation CD player that works with your TV."
And you'd say,
"But I have a CD player."
And your mom says,
"No, dear, CDI works with your television."
You'd probably feel pretty dumb and maybe even fake it like you'd already experienced the ultimate in games, movies, music, and more.
Trust me, babe, I know about this CDI stuff.
The CDI is like my secret shame. Like, I don't really want to tell people that I own one, but I do. And it's funny though, when I take it out like and show it to people, they're like, "I didn't even know this thing existed."
The CDI? Yeah.
I don't know anything about this. I don't know what that is. I don't.
It was great for its time, I guess, right? Just be nice.
It's funny to think that there's a system that actually had a worse go of it than like the 3DO, and the Sega CD, than the 32X. Like, it's just, it's kind of like, you want to know how bad systems could get. Here's the CDI, let me show you.
Yeah, I kind of liked good games when I was a kid, and CDI was a little thin on those.
I can tell you the CDI was this thing that was super overpriced, and it was basically like, I guess it was maybe like a user-friendly computer that hooked up to your TV. I guess that would be like a simple way to explain it. But that's totally not accurate. I mean, it's basically, I don't know how to say it other than it was a total waste of money.
Many others, one of them CDI, Compact Disc Interactive, has lots of developers excited, and Wendy Woods has a report on one such development.
You're in electronic arts, and your mission is to find information on the sudden kidnapping of the CDI team. You wander through the empty elevators and corridors looking for clues. This game is a simulation of what CDI, or Compact Disc Interactive, is supposed to do. Using a trackball as a pointing device, you move among real video images, not just computer animation, and hear real stereo digital sound.
The Philips CDI was the great experiment from somebody that had no business making a video game console.
Despite the fact that the CDI was probably one of the worst systems that ever came out, it's really, really significant because it's sort of what came as a result of Sony and Nintendo's soured relationship, because Sony was actually supposed to make the PlayStation as an add-on for the Super Nintendo, and once Sony kind of said to Nintendo, "Hey, you know, we want royalties off of every game sold," Nintendo kind of said to them, "Hey, you know, that's not what we want to do. We don't want to pay you guys for every game sold." So they basically told Sony to kind of F off, and Nintendo made a deal with Philips to develop a CD system. That deal kind of fell through, but because Philips and Nintendo were still contractually obligated with each other, Philips was allowed to publish some Nintendo games on the CDI.
And they were terrible. Maybe that's the reason why nobody else made any more of those games. There was a Mario game, and there was also a Zelda game. And it was like, if I remember right, it was like Hotel Mario, or Mario's Missing, or Mario's Numbers, or something crazy. But all I remember, it was totally not like the games that you know and love.
The audio wasn't great, the graphics weren't great, and the games were like super not memorable. So, all in all, not a great thing.
So it all kind of started with the whole Nintendo, Sony, Philips kind of triangle thing going on. And eventually Philips just released its own system because they thought they could get a piece of the video game pie there for a while.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
My boy, this piece is what all true warriors strive for.
I just wonder what Ganon's up to.
It's no wonder that Nintendo is so careful with its properties these days, because I mean, you look at what Philips did to those games and how god-awful that they are, that it's a wonder that they just didn't completely wreck the Zelda universe as a result. So we actually got 3 Zelda games and 1 Mario game called Hotel Mario, which is just horrible. The Zelda games are horrible too.
They were terrible. They were god-awful.
Enough. My ship sails in the morning. I wonder what's for dinner.
Oh boy! I'm so hungry, I could eat an Octorok!
So this is the crazy thing, like the really bad Zelda games have kind of made the CDI a collector's item.
How about a kiss for luck?
You've got to be kidding.
Squadala, we are off!
This is illegal, you know.
My cakes will burn!
Go now, my princess. Restore the celestial signs and rescue Link.
Help! Ganon from
The Faces of Evil, which is the one with the super terrible animated cutscenes and just it's all goofy looking.
Where everything's just kind of like this all the time and everybody just flows and glides through the frame just really inhumanly. And all the characters, all the faces, all the people, they all just look like big globs of awful. Everything looks so terrible.
How can we help?
When you play it, the controls are just so bad, and there just seems like there's no point to what it is that you're doing. There's no clear reason. It's just all bad.
But Father, what if something happens to you?
I'll take the Triforce of Courage to protect me.
The other one, which basically had the live action cutscenes as opposed to the animated cutscenes, and that was focused on Zelda, and that one was actually top down, like the old Zelda games, and it had a digitized Zelda walking around slashing her sword and things like that. But yeah, that was,
Many horrible things can be said about the CDI, and most are totally deserved. But the one thing that is kind of a big deal is it was one of the first major experiments with disk-based media.
It was one of those pieces of technology that not many people ever picked up and played. But those who did pick up and play it recognized kind of how groundbreaking it was for future technology and for future consoles. And it really kind of was the father of the CD, DVD-based gaming systems. Laid out all the groundwork and just ultimately was too far ahead of its time to succeed.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, Philips is sort of taking the same approach that Sony eventually took with the PS2, where you have sort of this all-in-one entertainment device. You know, with the MPEG add-on and stuff, you could actually play these movies that were sold specifically for the system, but the problem is just the support wasn't there. So, you know, kind of the argument that helped support the PlayStation 2 is that, hey, if it's, you know, it's not just a game system, it's a DVD player too, and that's the same thing with the PlayStation 3 and Blu-ray and things like that. So, kind of ahead of its time, but, you know, it really didn't have the support on the game front, and it barely had the support on the movie studio front too. But, you know, I think they were initially on to something back then. It just didn't really pan out for them. The original one was like huge. I mean, it was the size of a gargantuan like VCR. And I think Philips knew how ridiculous that was, so they released another version that kind of slimmed it down, took out some components, made it cheaper. But yeah, there were so many different versions too, and I just think that it confused people even more than they already were.
And so this thing cost, I think, somewhere around $700.
$700? The damn thing was selling for, which is a lot of money now. It was such an outrageous price.
You had to buy the MPEG add-on separately, which for a system that's supposed to be full motion video focused, adding an MPEG adapter thing on top of something that's already so expensive is just stupid.
And we're not the only developer.
We?
The company I work for.
Philips Electronics.
No, see, Philips invented compact disc technology, laser optical discs, and now compact disc interactive. It's a world standard. My company develops new titles for CDI. Oh, look, here's a new one coming out soon.
Thank you, Charlie O'Donnell. And
I've seen this show before. This is Joker's Wild.
The infomercial was actually really, really awesome because like there wasn't a lot of video game stuff on TV.
Help. Sorry to interrupt, but could we get back to the game?
Link, Faces of Evil?
That's the one.
May I recommend something less challenging in the dexterity and hand-eye coordination category?
There wasn't really anything particularly amazing about the system that was shown in this infomercial. The one thing that it did do really well was that it showed off kind of the full motion video capabilities of the system. And so they would show examples of The Seventh Guest, which was this great PC puzzle adventure game. And the version that actually came out for the CDI was super, super good. Like the video was super clean, like all the puzzles were in there. It was a great version. And if you wanted to sell somebody on the system, which was nearly impossible, that was the game to show them.
The first game that I played on it was a cyberpunk game called Burn Cycle. And it was cool because it was actually a combination of video and video games. So it was real people in the game, and you'd interact with the game through this controller that it had just a D-pad for your thumb and then 2 buttons on either side. So there was no way that you could move and shoot in the game at the same time. You sort of had to like take a step and then press a button to shoot and then take another step and press a button to shoot. But it was hilarious.
And then that infomercial also like highlighted this tennis game, which it kind of looked cool back at the time. It had the digitized characters like Mortal Kombat, but they're tennis players, obviously. And you know, they're showing it off in the infomercial, but the one thing they don't show you in the infomercial really in terms of what's going on is how the controller operated with the games. Horrible, horrible, horrible controller. Even as bad as the system was, it's a very important part of video game history because it sort of marks a pivotal point in video game history in multiple ways. I mean, first, kind of the adoption of CD-ROM based media was really, really important back then. I mean, it was kind of just a sign of the times, and that, you know, cartridges were on their way out. But more importantly, it's kind of known as the event or the system that kind of allowed Sony to become what it is today. I mean, if that deal had panned out, who knows where we would be at right now? Who knows if the PlayStation would even exist as it currently does? It marks a really huge turning point in our industry, and the point where it's like one electronics giant kind of went down in flames, and the other one, like, you know, took the ball away from Nintendo and ran with it and became massively successful. So it's a terrible system, but really, really important moment in video game history.
Hello, dearie. Oh, just a minute. Isn't it lovely? Bring some fairy dust and I'll make it a magic cloak.